Okay, so the SAT is a universally recognized college admission exam. As you probably already noticed, if you have friends from other high schools, which I hope you do, is that sometimes a biology class in your friend's high school is not actually the same class that you took in your high school. Maybe you had a harder teacher, or maybe you were lucky enough to be in one of those classes where almost everybody gets an A. So I guess what I'm getting at is that there's a lot of variance between classes in different high schools across the nation because the U.S. is a big country. And so that's why colleges use the SATs. They use it as a common measuring stick, which helps them compare students across the nation. So back to the question, why is the SAT important? Well, to get into college, duh. That's why we're all taking this test. But you already knew that. But did you also know that having a high score can really increase your chances of receiving scholarships and grants for college, which is like free money? Did you know that over $160 billion of financial aid were given out in 2010? Yes, kids, that's billion with a B. You know, the one that has 9 zeros. So now let's talk about college admission. So meet Joe, our friendly neighborhood college admissions officer. Because we're all here taking the SAT so we can get into college, right? Joe, why don't you help us out and show us what kind of things are really going to help us get into college? Here's the inside of a typical admissions officer's heart. It's cold, it's empty, it's kind of bland. Just kidding. So if you break all the things that admission officers look at into three major components, like we've done conveniently here on the screen, well, can you guess what 50% of that pie would be? What do you think that could possibly be? It's going to be your schoolwork. This is by far the most important factor in college admission. Your schoolwork means your GPA, your transcript, and also your course load. So that's like, what kind of classes did you take and how did you do? Now let's take a look at the other two factors, each worth 25%. Can you guess what another factor might be? And you might have. The next 25% is going to be your application. Your application includes all the things that you fill into your actual application. So that means your personal essay and your extracurriculars. Admission officers use this to get a sense of your interests and also who you are as a person. So, did you play the piano and the violin? If not, then you probably were not Asian. And lastly, the third factor here is the reason why we're all here today. And you guessed it, it's your SAT score. Your SAT score is about 25% of what colleges consider in their admissions decision. Oh, so that's why we're here today. And here's our next big question. Where did the time go? As you stand here in your life, all old and mature at the ripe age of 16 or 17, you might reflect on your life and wonder, how much of what I've done in life will help me get into college? Well, let's see. How much time did you spend in each of these three factors? Okay, let's start with the first one. Throughout high school, how many hours do you think you spent on getting your GPA? So that means all the time in class and all the time outside of class where you're doing homework and working on projects. Well, it's pretty much a full-time job, right? If not more. So let's say you spend 40 hours a week on your GPA, although many kids spend much more than that. And let's multiply that 40 hours a week across 50 weeks a year, I'm just estimating, and then multiply that against the 4 years you spent in high school. The 4 wonderful years. So then you get about 8,000 hours. And holy cow, that's a lot of hours. Okay, so moving on. What about your application portion? How many hours do you think you spent there? Think about all the time you spent playing a sport, working at the mall, or doing community service, all that extracurricular time as well. Okay, so let's say you spent 5 hours a week, and many of you guys who do sports or play a musical instrument spend much more than that. But let's say you spend 5 hours a week, and you multiply that across 50 weeks a year and 4 years of high school. You get 1,000 hours. And holy cow, that's a lot too. Okay, so holding my breath here because we're working on our last factor. Let's look at the SATs. How much time do you think the average student spends preparing for the SAT? Wow, that's a good question, right? What would you guess? Would you guess, maybe 100 hours, considering you spend thousands everywhere else? You would think, right? You would think at least a decent amount of time. But no, the average amount of time a student studies for the SAT is only 8 hours, and that's nothing. So what looks fishy here? You would think that after all that other time kids spent educating themselves, they would also make sure to put a good chunk of time towards this last important factor, their SAT score. 8 hours is so little that it almost doesn't make sense. That's kind of like if you recycled every day, but then drove a truck. How much are you really helping the environment, right? You see, you put all this effort into getting through high school, but now that you're almost done, are you really going to drop the ball on the SATs? But I know you won't because you're here listening to this video course right now. And that means you're not the average student, are you? Now think about it this way. If you spend an extra hour, just one extra hour, on your sport or your homework or your class, will that really significantly improve your chances of getting into college? Just that 1 hour? Well, what about an extra 10 hours? Would that really make a difference over 4 years of high school? Probably not too much. But on the SAT, a few hours really can make a huge impact. Especially since I can guarantee you that if you do prepare for the SAT, you will absolutely do better than if you had not prepared. Imagine that. Kids who study just do better. Minute by minute, the time you spend studying for the SAT gives you over 100% the return that doing anything else for the other 2 factors could possibly give you. And that is a true story.